Geir Lundestad, Secretary of the Norwegian Nobel Committee. Thank you for talking to us about the 2010 Nobel Peace Prize. Could we begin by you telling us who's received this year's prize?
Well, the recipient for this year is Xiaobo. He is a Chinese dissident. He has worked for more than 20 years for human rights in a non-violent way. He was a prominent participant at the Tiananmen incident in 1989. He is one of the main authors of Charter 08, which has turned out to be a very significant document, arguing that there should be human rights in China, as there should be all over the world. And he is, in a way, I think, recognized as the leader of the Chinese dissident community. And the Chinese government actually indirectly gave him this prominent position by the stiff sentence it meted out in December 2009, when it gave him a term of 11 years in prison.
So Xiaobo becomes the first Chinese citizen to get the prize. Why?
Well, that depends on how you define the Dalai Lama. I think the Dalai Lama, although he insists on the cultural autonomy of Tibet, he does recognize the Chinese framework.
Well, but nevertheless, the prize has decided to focus on China this year. Why has China become the focus of the prize?
Well, China has become an increasingly important power, and it has made giant strides. I mean, China now has the second largest economy in the world. It just surpassed Japan. And it has made progress in virtually all fields, but not equal progress in all fields. And we recognize that the human rights situation is not what it should be. China has signed and even ratified certain important international documents. And if you look at the Chinese constitution, particularly Articles 35 and 41, you will see that there are very strong human rights statements in the Chinese constitution itself. And we think that with this new important position, there follows responsibility. We have to look closely at China's overall record. And then we quickly find out that despite the tremendous progress that has been made, it falls short in the field of human rights.
During the announcement, there was a parallel made with the United States after the Second World War. Could you go into more detail about how the Peace Committee approaches countries that become great in power?
I think the point here and the reference to the United States was that each and every superpower and each and every great power has to be prepared to be criticized. And of course, there was a lot of criticism of the United States virtually all the time. And this goes with the territory. I mean, if you are a superpower, people will follow what you do very closely. And that's the way it should be. And now China is a rapidly rising power, and it has to be prepared for the same kind of review and the same kind of comments.
And you mentioned briefly about Charter 08 and Xiaobo in general. Could you sort of go into more specific detail about what the Charter is about and why Xiaobo is in jail?
Well, I think the reason is that despite these international commitments and despite these clauses in the Chinese constitution, the Chinese authorities are very afraid of subversion of state authority and anything that will reduce the power of the Communist Party. It has become possible in recent years to have discussion in China about important subjects. But as soon as this affects the position of the communist power, and particularly the highest authorities, we see that this is not possible. This will lead to the kind of reaction we have seen in Liu's case. So obviously there is no freedom of expression, despite what the Constitution says. he was found guilty of subversion of state power, which is a very broad clause indeed.
And speaking of state power, one thing that you mentioned this week was that you were under pressure from Chinese authorities not to award the prize to this person. Can you tell us a bit more about that and tell us how that influenced your decision?
It did not have much, if any, influence on the committee because there was nothing new in this. We know how the Chinese government feels about dissidents. We know how they felt about the prize to the Dalai Lama, and I have had many contacts through the years with various Chinese officials who have explained this to me. It was somewhat unusual that the Vice Foreign Minister would do this. But there was nothing new in what she said, and she did not come to Oslo to talk to me. I mean, she was here on other business, but we did have a breakfast meeting. There are many who approach the Norwegian Nobel Committee in support of certain candidates or against certain candidates. They never get to meet the committee. They may meet me as the secretary. And I think it's perfectly okay to receive these delegations, and in an average year I may receive 8 to 10 such delegations. So this is not this kind of pressure or lobbying or whatever we call it is not limited to the Chinese.
So it's not unusual for people to
no,
approach you?
No, it's not unusual. And therefore the influence is limited, if any.
So in light of all this, you seem to be sending out a direct message to China. In a nutshell, could you say what that message is, please?
Well, in a nutshell, the message is that you're now becoming a very influential power, a great power, and with that power follows responsibility. You should live up to your responsibilities, and you have certain responsibilities by international agreements and by your own constitutions to implement basic human rights.
That's a very strong message. What do you hope the response will be?
Well, we hope that they will take heed and notice and maybe even do something in a positive way. That's our hope. What the actual response will be, that's up to the Chinese authorities. But it's very important, as I explained to the Vice Foreign Minister, that the Norwegian Nobel Committee is a totally independent committee. We do not take advice from anyone, certainly not from the Chinese government, but not from the Norwegian government either. So in this sense, it would be very illogical if the Chinese authorities decide to punish in some way Norway, because this is not a decision taken by the Norwegian government, it is a decision taken by the Norwegian Nobel Committee.
Do you have any other concerns in awarding this prize?
Yes, this is, I mean, first of all, it's always difficult to award a Nobel Peace Prize because there is so much interest and there are so many candidates. Then we had to resolve whether it would be in the committee's interest to go into the situation in China. There are obvious complications here. Then we had to decide who would the dissident be. I mean, one problem has been that there are many dissidents, and who should we choose? And we know that the dissident community is very divided. So we had to discuss all these questions, and the result of these many and very complex discussions was announced just now.
You mentioned the complexity. There was I think a New York Times article earlier this week which mentioned that there were some dissidents who were also saying that the prize shouldn't be awarded to Liu Xiaobo. Why did you give the prize to him and no other dissident?
I think he's more and more recognized as a leading voice, perhaps the leading voice. And I have received much mail from all over the world and from many different Chinese dissidents. And I've been happy to see that there is an emerging consensus in Liu's favor. although there are some dissidents who have explicitly told us that they would be against a prize to him. All this was to be expected. I know about the situation of Chinese dissidents and communities in exile, and these kinds of divisions, they almost always happen.
And how many other peace prizes have been awarded to people who have been incarcerated?
I don't know the exact number, but we have done this many times. And this is our human rights tradition. We are very, very proud of our human rights tradition. And many who have written about the Nobel Peace Prize in books and articles, they have said that this is possibly our best tradition. These are our best prizes. I'm thinking of Ossietzky, 1936. I'm thinking of Sakharov, 1975. I'm thinking of Lech Walesa, 1983. Dalai Lama, 89, Aung San Suu Kyi, Burma, 1991, Shirin Ebadi, Iran, 2003. So we have a very strong human rights record. We are very proud of this record, and I think the committee felt that the question was, should we apply these principles also to China? And the committee said yes, because if we don't apply them to China, we do not have much credibility if we in the future award human rights prizes to much smaller countries than China. They would say, oh, it's fine that you do this in Iran and in Burma, but are you willing to say this to the Chinese authorities? And the answer came today.
So it was a lineage of history that you wanted to tell the story of human rights and the struggles, and you wanted to put a spotlight on them and highlight them to the world and say that the Peace Prize has a particular viewpoint on human rights.
Yes, we are very proud of our record. Of course, it's controversial. There's much criticism, many negative reactions. But the committee has to be prepared to stand up for important principles. And human rights is one of the most important principles. You may ask then, what is the connection between human rights and peace? The committee has long felt that there is such a connection. And of course, now in the international research community, there's a broad consensus among peace researchers and political scientists that there is indeed a strong or a robust connection between human rights, democracy, and peace. We also feel this is certainly in accordance with Alfred Nobel's will. Alfred Nobel speaks about fraternity between nations, and if you are to have true fraternity between nations, you must have human rights.
And have you been able to transmit a message through to the new laureate or his family?
No, we have not been able to do that. Obviously, he is under the full control of the Chinese government, and we will not be able to get in touch with him if the Chinese government does not cooperate in some way. Although in the long run, I think in these times of globalization, I think it will be very difficult for them to withhold this information totally.
And so what does that mean for the prize ceremony in December? Do you have to make alternative arrangements? Can someone receive the prize if they don't turn up to lecture and receive it?
We are going to hold all the events in a way as close to normal as possible. I mean, there will be a ceremony, there will be a banquet, there will be a concert, and what we will do about the laureate, that will be decided when we know who, if any, will come. But even if nobody comes, there will be representing the laureate, there will be a ceremony. His voice will be heard.
Geir Lundestad, thanks very much.
Thank you.